discussion, but I don't want to steal any more from Shasta.
Oh, that's fine. Take your time.
Shasta is a good example of putting your faith into your action and to your career. Now, some of us could do that better than others. There wasn't a lot of opportunity in some positions that you had. But there's always an opportunity to be a good person, a kind person, and a sharing person. But she works with government agencies, and that to me would be a strain on my patience and perseverance, I think. So tell us some more.
Oh, thank you. You've given me the big head already. Yes, I'm really sorry.
Part of the person because this person is so modest. But I don't know how many of you have read Jo Ann's book. But if you haven't, you should. I let Wiley talk about it, but we've been here for 3 hours. So it is a wonderful, wonderful book about the county next to us and where she grew up with her family, and really a beautiful story of perseverance, faith, and really how they made something of their lives. So I recommend it. You will enjoy it. We can hardly put it down. No work in the grave.
I pay for good to say.
No, it gave me a history lesson.
Yeah.
More than I would learn in school.
Yeah. It's great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. But again, thank you.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Can I add that Jo Ann is going to be talking and presenting her book on Monday on campus here at the library building. Is that correct? 5:30, 6:30?
That's on the 14th, yes.
Oh, it's not this week.
Hopefully not this week.
Okay. On the 14th, so mark your calendars.
And it's at the college.
Yes.
And in the Ramsey Center, which is in the main room.
Can we get something on the internet?
Where's Keith?
No, we were fine. Okay, we don't.
But yeah, as Jo Ann said, for those of you who might not know, I work for the government Head Start program, and it does sometimes put a strain on, I shouldn't say my ability to work with families at times, but there is this unique balance between being a minister and working for the government. And I think the government has really stepped in a sense of where the church used to be. I think about a lot of the Old Testament practices and like reaping the fields, and you left the corners for those who could not farm themselves or didn't have the ability to raise that kind of crop. You know, we think about the story of Ruth and Boaz, how she gleaned the corners of the fields. And how that kind of equates to modern day food stamps. I know that's a bit of a jump for you guys. In my brain, that all makes sense. And but just being able to supplement and provide where the church or where the community used to is where the government has stepped in. And I think we're still learning how to find that balance now between the church and the government, because people feel that the church only supplies to Christians. And I say we as in like the church as a whole, not Martin United Methodist, but we've kind of given that impression that we help our own and the outsiders are kind of on their own. And it's unfortunate, but it's become kind of a sad truth. And a lot of people will avoid Christian services because they're like, they feel that we're trying to convert them. And that's the only, like, we're giving you this, so you give us your soul. And that's kind of how they feel, that it's sort of, give us your soul, we'll give you this box of food. And it's, you know, it's become almost transactional in a sense. And I know people who have avoided church services because they didn't want to. They're like, oh, I don't want to sit through church, and I don't want to be stuffed over the head with a Bible. And being a Gen Zer, I am on TikTok, and I see a lot of churches that go into strip clubs now and talk to like the different strippers and sex workers, and like there's certain churches that have just really shown Christ's message without any need for, that transaction. And it's really framed the way I think about how am I working with others, It has to come across with a genuine interest, I think, and not just, for lack of a better term, like the sales pitch. As you guys know, like growing up in a farming community, if the flowers sprouted right up, we wouldn't care as much about it. We have to tender and be nurturing and not like, be like, you better grow, Me being impatient, that is kind of, I'll look at my little baby cactus and I'll be like, you better grow. But I think just realizing that patience and time and sincerity, words are so hard. And I have monologued for too long now. So, where do you guys feel that we as the church can be more sincere in our efforts and less of a sales pitch?
It goes back to the us, them kinds of things that we draw unconsciously sometimes. And if we help first the people who look like we do, that cuts out a large portion of the population who need help. Yes.
I grew up on a farm. My grandparents always farmed, and that was the only source of food they had. So, I grew up most of the time with my grandfather and grandmother. So, we farmed all the time. And that was our source of food.
My dad, till the day he died, took great pride in looking down at his plate at supper time, and he would say, I raised that. That came from my garden there. He felt a sense of ownership with the food, that it had been something that he had participated in. And that's, I think, important to remember. If people have a personal involvement in creating a solution to the problem, they feel more ownership in it, and I think are more likely to take care of the resources carefully.
I think people nowadays really know how to farm because, we don't have that many farmers around here anymore. But we had a huge chicken house that we raised chickens in, and that was our source of food.
Oh, yes.
Was that chicken house and our gardens and stuff like that. And we had cows to milk and all that. So, I think if people could learn today to know how to farm a little bit, I think they'd have more things to eat. And, as I grew up, even when I got married, we raised a garden. We had tomatoes and stuff in the garden. People today just don't know how to do anything.
There's an interesting thing that's happening in some of the cities. Some of the cities are having co-op little plots. And my son is so proud of their little plot that they have in Cary, and it's in the midst of the suburbs and whatever, but they tend this so carefully, and everything that they they send me pictures too of their food. It sort of goes back to like my dad looking at his plate. But I think that's helpful. But what happens, I fear too much, is that the people who take advantage of that are the people who don't need the help as much as the people who live in the high-rise government housing.
Yes, Wiley?
It seems to me, and the pastor of the Episcopal Church is a good example here. He lives in my community, in Asheville. My grandfather always had a big garden and other animals and so forth. He was a preacher, Methodist preacher. He practiced what is, I like to call, and many like to call, the ministry of presence. He demonstrated the best farming understandings by what he grew, in what he grew, and was the unpaid agricultural agent. He taught not only his congregation, but his community how to deal with the presence of the McCormick Reaper, which changed farming completely during his lifetime. Now, there are churches and people in churches who now are making their former lawns into gardens. And garden by gardens, I mean stuff to eat gardens. Just as an example, what if our front yard, church yard, or part of it, was a garden for food, and instead of being for members of the church or only members of the church, we had signs that made the produce available to the community, and we could tie that into what we're doing with the Girl Scouts. It could, and we made sure that the way we did that garden was the very best practices for ecology, saving leaves, That's what the pastor of our Episcopal church does with his yard in Beverly Hills.
And I think the Baptist church had at least some kind of liaison with what was called God's Little Acre. And that was open to the community to come and grow whatever you had a need to grow or wanted to grow, and then harvest it. And we all have, if we have any, even if you have pots of tomatoes, you have times when you have more than you can possibly eat. And I still feel guilt when I have to throw away or recycle in a compost heap food that could be useful for people. But yet, I can't use it, or I don't want to do that. I don't want to make that work for myself. So we put up, sort of like when they put up all the barns and filled them all full. What did Jesus say about that? Where do you lay up your store of good stuff? Do you build another barn? Do you put another shelf in the basement to hold more jars of jelly than you have down there? When my mother died, basement was full of canned food, the cellar was full of canned food, and fortunately, the people who bought the house wanted all of that food. So that saved me the disposal problem, and it helped them at the same time.
Saves you from guilt.
Yes, yes, that's a powerful motivator.
Another quick idea, we have an arts group here. What if we had a group that helped each other learn best practices in our garden, and they were the same, and they were reached out in the same way that the church mice do, not just to our members.
Just
I'm sure that John and Carla could tell us how to grow a number of things, because they sometimes bring stuff to the choir to share. And I know Lee has a garden, don't you, Lee?
Yes,
A huge garden.
Alan's the one that knows about that mostly, but yes, we do.
So Ellen, I'm put all the time.
It's just getting the people to do it, that's,
She already brought that up.
Yeah.
Carla just whispered that in my ear.
Right.
What then?
About getting the people to do it.
I mean, it could be as simple as for those who have a garden or have excess or something of that nature, particularly things that are not non-perishables that we would normally locate in that. I think the Girl Scouts have even shared, like, if we want to put that there are fresh vegetables or something out there during that season, we can send them a quick note. They'll post it on Facebook. We could share it on ours. I'm sure if we get that out, we may even be able to coordinate with the town hall just to let them know so they can share that with their channels as well.
I've already had the idea pop through my head about, putting a sign out there by the Girl Scout thing. Fresh produce, 12:15 every Sunday. Right after church. It just, they come a little early. No reason they can't come to the service.
Well, some of us could run out there and grate them and stop to get the vegetables or whatever.
But when it happens.
Yeah. But there are ways.
These are good
We
ideas.
just need to be
Good some
creative
things that could
and
happen.
follow through.
I bet by the time church was over, it'd be empty.
That would be good.
Yeah.
just to sort of pivot on this idea of, Jo Ann was talking about make sure we don't only serve people that look like us. We also have to be careful that we don't come across as this white savior complex. Colonization has been a big topic, at least for my generation, and it's made me take a good look at, what in my life have I whitewashed just to appease me by learning other cultures. I remember the dream catcher was super big when I was in high school. Like everybody had dream catchers on everything. It was a pattern, it was a design, and whenever I came to realize this, and my family has some native heritage, you can't tell it by this alabaster, but I was like, Mom, do you think we should take down the dream catchers in the house? And she's like, why? We bought them on the res. They're handmade by the people of the reservation. And I went, oh, okay. And I just dusted them and went on. But, we have to make sure that we're not taking over someone else's culture. We also have to make sure that we're not stomping on it because we have the resources to stomp on it.
And not everybody has to eat exotic Swiss chard or whatever. You can do turnip greens just as well in that category. Even though the Swiss chard might be your favorite, it might be new and not familiar for some people, and they might not know how to fix it or want to fix that.
Give them a recipe.
Or have a tasting.
Yeah, for example.
The conference does have, if we were really I don't want to suggest that we're not really serious. If we were really serious to the extent that we're willing to commit ourselves to doing this for the longer haul, the conference does have grants available for things like quote unquote dinner church. This idea that we would be given funds to basically cook here and serve the community, and say do it on like a Tuesday night or something of that nature, and have a time maybe of a brief reflection and fellowship and have dinner available, and the conference could help sort of seed that or start that if that's ever something we were interested in doing. There are plenty of other grants out there for similar approaches, maybe even something like a garden or something of that nature, if we could meet the grant requirements, commit ourselves to meeting the grant requirements.
And just a side thought to that thought, our FFA program at Madison High is the third largest in the state, oddly enough. Like 2 or 3 of our officers are like the state officers. So if we ever wanted to like work with them, look at that. It's the young people. It's the farmers of America. Vegetables, you know.
Your original question, though, was broader. It
Yes.
seems to me. And it's one that you and I have experienced, and I'm sure lots of others. How do we live out, I didn't say talk about necessarily, but how do we live out our faith in the context of what others would call our secular jobs? There is no secular for committed Christians, because all is under God. But how do we live out who we are? If we're a lineman for General Electric, or if we are a bartender, or whatever you were or are in the community, how do we do that? Not trespassing on other people, but living and knowing and allowing people to know why you are living as you are. Because being honest about who you are and what is motivating you is not trespassing, it's revealing. It's being vulnerable.
And I'd say this carefully and treading, in the sense of, you know, I grew up missionary Baptist, and it almost feels like, looking back, a lot of the ministry I was in was just to get your salvation ticket punched. And they sent you out into the world, and that was really it. Like, you're either doing the sales pitch, or you're getting your ticket punched. Like, you're in one of those 2 stages. And we have, you know, I think that's what's deterred a lot of people, is that everyone will give the sales pitch, but then give no reason to want to buy it. You know, you'll be like, you need this brand new car. Why? Because it's a brand new car. But why? Like, not all these, like, it has 4-wheel drive and air conditioning, you know what I mean? Like, you have to live out the like, why have this label if you have no reason for having this label? Does that make sense? I feel like I'm making no sense.
And as we have, many of us have experienced, our life story is not a straight line.
No.
That there are places where we are put in situations, sometimes with relatives and sometimes not, where someone adopts you as a person that they want to be around and they want to know about, and you have a relationship that you didn't expect to have, but you have some obligations and you have also some opportunities. And then as we age, we tend to think, oh, I'm retired, I'm free. That doesn't particularly happen because you have other problems and issues which come up, like you may have to take care of an ailing spouse, or you may have to change your role from being a grandparent to being a parent again. And none of those are particularly easy. So
but they're worth the effort.
So where is the church in this transitioning, in this new roles that we're asked to take? Maybe you have an opportunity to have a job or to run for office. How many of us have run for office in this group? Ever? Why not?
Does council count?
What's the prayer of St. Francis? Grant me the wisdom that we know that one, right?
But do we neglect sometimes doing what we are capable of doing and we could be doing and probably, I hate this word, should be doing?
This may not work for everybody, but I will make a little confession here. When I encounter that situation, I have the story of the resurrection. It was the gardener. It was the man on the road to Emmaus. That is Jesus. That's the face of Jesus, the face of God, if you want to say it that way. And so when I look at these things, something like that, I'm always, what do I hear from the people around me? And if it's often enough and long enough, and it's from different people, then I really consider it. Otherwise, it could be just me from the inside, and I always worry about deception. Self-deception is so easy. So I'm just sharing that. So when you get, I've had those occasions in my life, but usually it's, I haven't been paying attention. The good Lord is telling me through Grady and through Shasta and through Emily and whatever, maybe I better think about this one. I'm just sharing that.
I may be putting my foot in my mouth with this because I'm certainly not a church historian, and there are probably those who know church and Christian history in this room. There are those who know church and Christian history in this room far, far, far better than I could ever dream of. But if I'm not mistaken, Christianity sort of started to take better hold in the West during the Black Plague. Largely because Christians were the ones who weren't afraid to go to the homes of the sick and minister to those, not through bringing them the gospel, but bringing them food and trying to nurse to them in that particular state.
Yes.
Well, even in one of Paul's epistles, to see how they treat one another. Don't you want to be part of that group?
And it also was willing to live out your faith even when it was likely to kill you.
The early church thought that was the only way to live out your faith, was to die in the act of Christ. And in the early church, I don't remember the emperor at the time, but he would light Christians on fire to keep his parties warm. And people saw that as an honor, because if the emperor knew you were Christian, you were on his radar. That was like your ultimate.
I was just thinking about your branding thing.
Yes.
it's interesting to me, and I think this relates to our Christian branding, to use that word. Starbucks as a corporation had a particular brand and was very popular with a particular group of people. Most of the people in this room would say younger people. The Starbucks brand has almost totally changed in its perception of what it means, because the owners of Starbucks have not lived what they said they were for when it applied to their corporation, i.e. opposing the unionization of their workers. When you don't stand for what you say you stand for, when it hurts you, it destroys or at least changes who you are seen as.
So, a verse that, I don't know about you guys, but for me, I was probably 15, 16. And there's always, I think, this one verse that sticks with you when you read it, and it just hits you, and it becomes your kind of life thing. Don't get me wrong, like the whole Bible isn't part of my life, but this verse really changed my perception on how to live my faith. And it's John 15, and it's 12 and 13. This is my command, love one another as I have loved you. That no one has greater love than this, to lay down his life for his friends. And then verse 14 says, you are my friends, and if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants anymore because a servant does not know his master's doing. I call you friends because I've made known everything that I've heard from my Father.
That might be an interesting thing to do on Sunday, maybe, is to have each person say, what is the verse that has meant very most to you, or that resonated with you? And I think it would be telling. And it may have changed from the time that you were 15 to something that's more doable or more comforting or whatever.
For me, my perception of lay down my life changed so much between 15 to now. When I was 15, like my generation is the first to have school shootings, really, and like mass sort of things like that. And I was always told when I was younger, like, one of these days a gunman could come into your school and you have to declare you don't love God or they'll shoot you. It was, I don't know if y'all know how the Baptists be working, but it's very fear operated. Hate to be rude about it, but and I realized that for me, laying down my life as an adult is laying down selfishness and pride and laying down wanting to do my own thing and laying down, I call it the blinders of consumerism, just buying stuff from companies that are using child labor and things like that, and having to be more conscious. And laying down my life means remembering that it's not about me, and it's about loving and serving Christ, and by doing that, I'm taking care of me.
Is all growth positive and feel good?
No.
Sometimes we have to be willing to be uncomfortable and to not do something that we would like to do for us personally or just singly, but to be a part of a relationship or a part of a group.
I don't know if you might have heard me tell this. It was actually a year ago, I think, no, 2 years ago. My grandmother fell and broke her hip and her arm, and my granddad had just had major heart surgery. And so I took time, and it was right after I graduated, I moved into their home for 11 weeks, and I did all their in-home rehab full time. And as someone who doesn't want kids, I never thought I would have to wipe a butt, much less my grandparents' butts. But I would not trade that time for all the money in the world. It was not that my grandparents were my sole parents, but they were very much also parental figures in my life, and it was like I got to finally start. I finally got to start paying them back for being at every game that I was in and every play, and they came to every award show, baked birthday cakes. Growth wasn't easy, but it was invaluable.
It's a journey, and sometimes the road is rocky, and sometimes it's nice and smooth. So.
And the rocky times are where we grow.
I've never seen a beautiful view that didn't have a terrible hike to get there.
So as we go forth for the next week, maybe we can think about some opportunities that we might be willing to take, rather than just walk by and turn your head the other way.
I grew up with the phrase Christianity only has a retirement plan after death. So.
A couple of announcements. First off, and I admit I'm also the first one to struggle with this as we think about sort of our commitments and who we are as a church, sort of the exclusivity of it. But I think it's also along the same vein as United Methodist Women has done with the upcoming November 15th tour of the Anderson Rosenwald School. I hope people can make that coming up. That's a little ways out, but it should be a really fun, nice event. Other things that are coming up before that, next Sunday morning, 7:30 a.m., Bright Hope Laurel is sponsoring a men's breakfast at, again, 7:30 a.m. at Bright Hope Laurel in the fellowship hall there. It's free to whoever wants to participate. They'll take up a little offering that will go toward like heating oil and firewood and things of that nature, but it's not required. If you are interested in going, if you would let me know by Wednesday, they just need to know how many people they should expect next Sunday. Also, next Sunday will be the deadline. Our church Christmas party this year, we're combining up with Bright Hope Laurel. So it's going to be two-part, sort of like it was last year, but hopefully a little bit broader in celebration. So it will be on the second Sunday in December. That is December the 11th. And the first part will be a potluck following the service that day. So Bright Hope Laurel is going to come over and join us. We'll have, instead of our third Sunday fellowship meal in December, we'll have a second Sunday. And we'll enjoy a meal with them. And then at 2 p.m., for those who would like to participate in that, you'll have the ability to purchase a group ticket to go to Sart's production of A Southern Appalachian Christmas. So last year, I think we saw A Christmas Carol. This year to be Southern Appalachian Christmas. I think this is the first production of that at Sart's, so it should be really neat. I believe tickets are going to be somewhere around $35 a piece, but once we see how many people we have, they may be a little bit less than that. I think that's a little bit conservative on the price. So keep that in mind coming up. But if you would like to participate in that, next Sunday is probably going to be the deadline, so we can make sure that we have enough seats for everyone who is coming, because those are filling up quickly. So Christmas party on the 11th. Men's breakfast next Sunday, and upcoming on December 15th is the UMW trip, which all are welcome to join to the Anderson Rosenwald School.
And they mentioned that the men's breakfast is all you can eat.
It is. All you can eat for free, and if you are feeling charitable, yeah. It's a great bargain.
I've been there.
And I'm sure